promising some Hart Island talk and some Bobby Driscoll talk and getting into James, I think where James Franco is trying to go with Bruce Robinson 2319 is, in my opinion, I think we're wanting Hollywood exposed, which I've been wanting to do some more Hollywood exposure, but I've been wanting to go back in time to Bobby Driscoll, Judy Garland, Shirley Temple. Like, it's time we bring those names back up. So this is gonna be in my entirety on my YT channel, and then probably 2 or 3 parts on TikTok. So once again, I'm gonna do the whole TikTok thing. But in its entirety, it'll be over here. Sorry for the lighting over here. I know I need to get curtains so that my light can shine better. I am trying here. Okay, so I got so much notes on both Bobby Driscoll and Hart Island while we were driving today. Because we had our visit with the kids, I was scrambling and making notes and working a script for some talking points. So let's get to it. So I'm going to hit go on TikTok, and we're going to get into this. We're going to talk Hart Island. Let's dig into Hart Island, but first we have to dig in to Bobby Driscoll. So we're going to start with Bobby Driscoll in this part 1 on TikTok, because we got to dive into Bobby Driscoll and why being buried on Hart Island was so devastating for everybody. So let's get into it. So we're going to lead into Hart Island so we can talk about Hart Island. So Bobby Driscoll, when he was 5, they lived in like Iowa or something. Oh gosh, I forgot to write down the state he lived in. Like Indiana or something like that. Like up there. And his dad needed drier climate, so they moved to Los Angeles, where Bobby Driscoll at 5 years old, they took him to an audition for the movie Lost Angels, and he got the part. At this time, in the early 1950s, Walt Disney was looking for that beautiful golden boy that was a cartoon but in real life. Like, Walt Disney for the last 20 some odd years had tackled animation, but it was time to move into. And so Walt saw Bobby Driscoll in the movie and thought, that's my boy. And at the time, Walt Disney had 2 daughters. And he took in Bobby and said, like a son, literally. He's like, this is my boy. He would fluff his hair and be like, this is my boy. And he wanted him for Song of the South. They were going to be bold. Walt was going to be bold and do Song of the South. And he needed that beautiful boy. And Bobby was it. And he was just a youngin'. Okay, I went through a lot of this in just a few seconds. And when Song of the South came out, Bobby Driscoll was that beautiful boy. Audiences fell for him. He was everything that everybody wished for. The beautiful boy with the beautiful voice, the just beautiful face. Like, he was perfection. He was cartoon came to life. He was just perfection. Bobby, at this time in the 50s, he was making $800 a week. Walt was giving him personal screenings. Walt was spending time with him. He was Uncle Walt to Bobby. It was magical time. When it came time to, And other studios sought after him, but Disney owned him. Disney was like, everything Bobby Driscoll is ours. Your voice, your looks, your clothes, anything you do, you're ours. That's where Disney was. Disney was like, you are ours. Okay? You are ours. And then they wanted to do Treasure Island. But the problem with Treasure Island was they wanted to film it in the UK. And the UK had strict child labor laws. And the UK took Disney to court and won and said, you are working Bobby Driscoll too hard. You can't do this. And Disney fought back really hard on this. And once again, the UK won. They eventually deported Bobby Driscoll out of their country. They're like, no, you have to have a certain amount of school time. You're doing this, you're doing that. You're breaking laws. And so they struggled with getting him in Treasure Island, and they had to do workarounds because Hollywood runs on American time. And the UK was like, not in my country. So let's see. We went over that. Okay, back. He was deported. So, and then Bobby Driscoll at 12 years old wins his first Oscar. Like, beautiful golden boy standing on stage, 12 years old, winning an Oscar. Like, there's this beautiful picture. Bobby's just smiling up as he receives his Oscar. Like, perfection, getting rewarded for that perfection. But as Bobby approached 12 years old and he started to go through puberty and his voice started changing, that's when he started peaking and life started kind of being hard on Bobby, because he was not that golden boy anymore. But then he got the role of Peter Pan because his voice was still golden, and he would make a character of himself and pitch his voice higher, and he would try and act young and stay young, and he was working hard for Walt. He was trying to please Walt and be that little boy, even though his body was fighting it and he was growing up. And they were trying to cast him in other movies, but he started getting acne the older he got, and they would put thick makeup on him and they would change the lighting so that he would look beautiful and perfect. And it was so hard on Bobby. He was trying. By the time Bobby got to 16, he drove in on the Disney lot and the guard stopped him and said, "Who are you?" And he said, "I'm Bobby Driscoll. I'm here to get on the studio lot. I'm here to see Walt." And without any word, without any notice, Walt cut him off the lot. The guard said, "Walt doesn't want you on the lot anymore." And then a termination letter was sent to Bobby's parents. His acne, his voice changed. Walt couldn't do it anymore. And Walt, just before he turned 16 and cast him off the lot, Walt stopped talking to him, stopped taking him private screenings. Walt stopped, like, just would pass him by in the hallway, no more shuffling his hair, saying, "My boy." This is when he went to a Hollywood high school. And everybody would make fun of Bobby Driscoll. He was a fallen star. And they'd be like, "Fly, Peter Pan, fly." And Bobby was never socialized. He lived on the Disney lots prior to this, talking to directors and adults and dealing with movies. He did not know how to handle high school. He had no social skills. And so he struggled. And one day behind a bleacher, a guy brought him a brown bag of the devil's lettuce and said, "This will ease your pain." And that led to the Big H. And that was the start of Bobby's downfall. He tried to get roles, but the anxiety of being Bobby Driscoll and losing his job got to him. He tried to get married. He had 3 kids. But the pressure of working got to him. He tried to be a carpenter. He found some solace in that for a little while. At the age of 24, he went to prison for writing bad checks. He was struggling. He had no more money, no more trust funds, nothing. He was dried up. He was washed up. His anxiety wouldn't let him go back to the movies. Jerry Lewis tried to help him and be like, "Hey, Bobby, let's try this movie." And he got clean in prison and tried to work with Jerry Lewis, but the anxiety got to him and he just couldn't do it. And he tried. And then he ended up in Hollywood. He left his wife, his kids. He ended up with some artists. He started going by Robert Driscoll. He was no longer Bobby. He was Robert. He was the artist. The substances got heavy and life got heavy. And then he lost all his friends he found. He would go to parties begging people for a place to stay, a couch to sleep on, some more substances, just anything. And Bobby became washed up. And this is what leads us eventually to his sad and lonely death in an apartment full of substances, all by himself. His wife didn't even know he passed away. His mom didn't find out for 18 months. Nobody recognized Bobby Driscoll. He looked 20 years older. And let's get into it in part 2, Hart Island and Bobby Driscoll. Okay, so sorry, I got to really quickly change this out. I'd like you guys to see a little behind the scenes of, once again, okay. I forgot to talk about how he was blacklisted. Once Walt Disney cut him out, he was blacklisted. No other studio wanted him. Like, the word had gotten around that Bobby Driscoll just wasn't young perfection, Disney's darling anymore. Like, a lot of things went wrong. Like, Hollywood went way sideways with this. Like, it's sad because, like, once Walt was done with him, everybody was done with him. Okay, let me hashtag this real quick. Is that 1, 2, 3, 4? Yeah, that's 5. Okay. Let's post that and then we will move on to part 2, where we're going to talk more about part 2. We are going to talk more about, we're going to get into Hart Island now. And we're going to expose Hollywood, New York, and all the bad stuff around, and let's dig into it. Let's dig into Hart Island. Okay, here we go. 10-second timer, and then we'll count it down and we'll get into Hollywood. We'll get into Hart Island. Let's get into Hart Island. Okay, so let's get into Hart Island. So once Bobby Driscoll was basically poisoned and couldn't really get a job, and his anxieties wouldn't let him, and he went down that bad rabbit hole and just couldn't keep friends and couldn't find a place to belong, he ends up eventually in a mass grave on Hart Island. And what is Hart Island? It's an island outside of New York, just outside of Coney Island. Let's get into what Hart Island is. So Hart Island, just before the Civil War, was inhabited by indigenous tribe. It's not a well-known tribe. It was like a Kiowa tribe. I've never heard of this tribe before. So it's not a known tribe like Cherokee, Navajo, Chippewa, Powhatan, the typical tribes we know. And the Civil War needed to train their colored troops because coloreds could fight for America, but they couldn't train with the regular American soldiers. Well, they discovered Hart Island, and they didn't care that indigenous people were on Hart Island. They said, bye, and kicked them off Hart Island. And they built their colored training camp. And I tried to look this up because the indigenous people live on there. But since 1865, I think it is, over 1 million people have been buried on Hart Island. So if there is an Indian burial ground, we wouldn't know about it because we covered it up with a mass grave, which is horrible to do. And Hart Island is known as the most haunted island, but we'll get to why you cannot touch down to Hart Island. You cannot. A regular citizen cannot just walk onto Hart Island, but we'll get to that. So the Civil War, they trained there. It's called the Black Wall. So basically they trained their colored troops there. And then when the Civil War was over and they no longer needed to train their troops, you know what they needed to do? They needed to get rid of their lunatic women. Women who were uncurable. Women who just society didn't want to see anymore. So they built an asylum called Blackwall Hart. They took the chronic and incurable and took them in. And well, if you passed away or you were a single mother with a baby, if you had a baby that was born sleeping, well, you got buried in a mass grave. They would build trenches the size of tennis courts and stack like 150 bodies in there, and they didn't put gravestones. So 1 million people on Hart Island and nobody knows where anybody is or who's there. Because nobody cared about these people. Women, hey, you guys, don't bark at each other. Women at this time were considered lunatics. So in 1895, they had the asylum closes, and they no longer need it for that. So what do they do with it? Well, now they bring a men's prison. And so it was a prison for a time. And then while it was a prison, in the early 1900s, Coney Island comes about. But Coney Island is only for the whites. No coloreds allowed in Coney Island. Now comes along this billionaire Riley. They call him the billionaire Riley because he's just this, and he decides, you know what? I'm going to build a Coney Island, but I'm going to build it for coloreds. I want colored people to have a place to go. So where does he build it? He buys 4 acres on Hart Island and says, I'm going to build an amusement park right over these mass graves. No problem. It's not a big deal. You gotta love it, right? I'm going to build this. So he goes, and in July 4th, 1925 was supposed to be the opening of this new amusement park. However, New York's like, we have a men's prison on that island. What if somebody escapes and tries to blend in on your amusement park? And they're going to get away with this. So New York fought, but the billionaire Riley won out. And New York had to pay him. Now I need to look up exactly what baby Tanika is, but a woman had a baby who was born sleeping, and the hospital for 4 days wouldn't tell her anything about her baby. And then after 4 days, they gave her some paperwork and said, well, your baby is buried in the city cemetery. And she's like, where's the city cemetery? And they're like, the city cemetery. And she's like, where's that at? And they're like, the city cemetery. That's what the paperwork says. So her baby is like disappeared. And she doesn't know where it's at. So in 1981 in New York, we have the HIV and AIDS breakout. And so the LGBT community is not having an easy go at this. Okay. They're not having a fun. Yeah. This is not a good. The 80s was not a start of a good decade for them. Okay. And then they took the people that passed away. Whoops. Oh gosh. My tablet is. Ugh. They took the people that passed away of this. Hold on. I'm going to pause it for a second. Ugh. It is. Why is my. It doesn't want me to talk about Hart Island, does it? Like, it is defying me. It doesn't want me to talk about this. I'm like, yeah, it's like, nope, you're not talking about this. You're not talking about it. Okay. All right, let's get into it. All right, so guess what they do? Everybody's heard of Rikers Prison? Rikers is not on Hart Island. But Rikers is a prison that's always been under fire and in the news. Well, they take the prisoners and they say, guess what? You get a job burying all the contaminated people. So they get in hazmat suits, and their job, you get solitary confinement, you get punished if you say, no, I don't want to do this. Because it's not a fun job. Mass graves? So they're like, okay, go way on that side of Hart Island. Okay, they're like, go way, way, way over there because these people are contaminated and we need them way over there. Now, and this goes forward all the way even into COVID, our time, 2019. They do the same thing with all the people in New York passing away of COVID. People were dying so fast, they were contaminated, and they're like, Hart Island, you go. You know? And this is the place that Bobby Driscol, 18 months after he passed away, his mother found him by fingerprints. She was looking for him. She hadn't heard from him in a long time. And by his fingerprints, they said, oh, we found this guy abandoned in a house. We buried him on Hart Island. Well, how do you get on Hart Island? You have to ask the Department of Corrections because the Rikers prisoners are the ones working on Hart Island. And so you have to get special permission. And in 2020, they did start a Hart Island group exposure. They're like, let's expose this island. And a woman did get to go on Hart Island and sneak and take pictures. Something you're not supposed to do because they don't want you to know that there's over 1 million bodies just namelessly buried in this place. From colored people to women to prisoners to random people. If you died in New York and we didn't know who you were, Hart Island, baby. And so they want this exposed because there's so many. This is insanity, the amount of people buried on Hart Island today. That New York is like, Hart Island, what did I say is known as? It's known as, I got so many notes. The the people that they want to forget, I can't even read my own handwriting when I'm in a hurry. Oh my gosh. But yeah, basically, oh, Hart Island, Hart Island. So you see kind of why it's hard that they buried Bobby Driscoll on Hart Island. I'm going through this a little bit faster than I thought. I was like, am I going to have to do 3 parts? I was like, oh man. Let's see, should I do a part 3? Because now we've talked about we've done the gist of Hart Island. We've done Bobby Driscoll and why it's so sad that this Jim Hawkins, Peter Pan, Song of the South, perfect boy gets so rejected by Walt and ends up eventually forgotten. Hollywood's dream boy, the first dream boy. When Walt decided to go live action, Bobby Driscoll was his boy. This is why my heart goes out to Bobby Driscoll so much. Like, this is why I've been wanting to cover Bobby Driscoll, and I have been taking notes. However, James Franco's kind of thing is what kind of gave me that into kind of pivot towards, is this what James Franco wants? With Nail and I is about 2 actors trying to get jobs on the bottle, living a Monty Python life, British humor. And what Hollywood does to people. With Bobby Driscoll, he was blacklisted. And Bobby Driscoll ended up, and I'm going to get into Judy Garland and definitely Shirley Temple. I grew up, my mom talked about Shirley Temple a lot, like, oh, they had to put exactly like 42 ringlets in her hair and they would beat her. Like, my mom knew the abuse. And yet, like, everybody knew the abuse and said nothing. Like, well, what can we say? Like, can we do anything as Americans? I don't know. Well, yeah, we can. See, money is power. We have the power to not pay for these things anymore. We have the power to drown Hollywood. Just stop going to the movies. Stop watching your stars on TikTok. Stop worshiping people. Like, the problem is everybody loves their entertainment. Everybody loves their stars. Last night we went and saw we don't see movies anymore unless, like I said, it pertains to exposing things of, like, so last night we saw what's that movie? The Disclosure Day with Emily Blunt. And it was a very long movie. It was 2.5 hours long. It flowed really well. Like, I didn't get bored and sit there and be like, oh, when is this movie done? It's like, oh. It flowed so well, I didn't notice the 2.5 hours go by. So that was a plus. I forgot to look at my chat and see if anybody's chatting. Okay, nobody chatted. Okay. I keep forgetting. Turn on the chat, Rose. So you can see if people chat. Oh, there's so much to expose from the beginning, the inception of Disney. I grew up in a Ford family. I remember growing up in a Ford family and a Disney family. We thought Ford was the best. And then I heard about Henry Ford made all of the tanks for the Germans in World War II. During the war, and this is all fair game, gosh, Henry? The U.S. bombed his factory in Germany. And when the war was over, Henry Ford sued the United States for $15 million and won. Now, how can he get away with suing them for bombing a factory in wartime? And we had the right to bomb that tank factory. So it was owned by an American. It shouldn't have been owned by an American. See, wartime, maybe if you guys want, let me know if you want to get into Preston Bush and what's his name? He's got that weird name, Butler or something, like who turned on JP Morgan and Preston Bush and turned them into the United States for treason. And Sobering Stories goes over it really well about all of this, because Smedley Butler, that's his name. Smedley Butler, that's an interesting name. So, hey buddy, what you doing? So Smedley Butler, yeah, turns them all in because they got 500 soldiers together and they were going to storm the White House and call martial law and take over. JP Morgan, Preston Bush. Yes, we're talking about George H.W. Bush's father and George W. Bush's grandfather. So it's no surprise when you find out that George H.W. Bush or whatever had German N-words in his cabinet. I thought he was Republican. I thought he was a good guy. And here you have a guy who ran for the Republican Party. There's just so much to expose. Like, everything is connected. Everything goes back to JP Morgan. Everything goes back to the Titanic. Everything goes back to the Rothschild. And like everything just goes back now to BlackRock and Vanguard. And everybody's got their hands in all of this stuff. And there's so much to expose. And it's just like, James Franco, I can take this a bunch of ways. Like, we can start with Nail and I and talking about washed up actors. Or is James Franco, are you feeling washed up? Is that what's going on? Is James Franco feeling washed up? 2319, he's come in contact with plenty of monsters. As Coffee and Colt said, that one girl, what's her name, stuck up for... Let me go back on my notes. That one girl stuck up for James Franco and said, Well, he's had really bad influences. Oh, that's an interesting. So there's another case I want to go over. These I put notes in here of different cases I want to go over. Like this notebook is full of like got some Gypsy Rose stuff that when I used to cover Gypsy Rose, and I actually okay. Here's James Franco. What's her name? Charlene of Disaster Artists. She said the allegations that he was influenced by people around him. And James Franco is saying, now I want to expose this. I want to expose this now. 2319, I want to expose the monsters in Hollywood. But why he chose Bruce Robinson is what I want to know. Is it because Within Nail and I portrays it really well? Is it because they portray a lot of what? Yeah, see, here's more Gypsy Rose stuff. This is Amy Fisher. I wanted to go over Amy Fisher. I did. I did all this over a year ago. These are some of my notes from a year ago of I talking in the crime world about different people. So my notebook is like scattered. I'll just open up a page and be like, and so it's not in perfect order. So here's my James Franco notes. I can see that James Franco got caught up in Hollywood. He has that very like formative personality where he's a fun guy. He looks like a fun guy in all of his interviews. When people meet him in person, he looks like a fun guy. He doesn't look like a mean guy. He doesn't look like a guy that he looks like a really fun guy. Like I said, he looks like a great fun guy. And so, am I going the right direction? I hope so, James. By the way, I love your name, James. I gave that to my son. James is one of those good James. I like James. It's a good name. And so I hope I'm going the right direction where James Franco wants to go, because everybody is ignoring the Bruce Robinson on his shirt. And the pause symbol, like I said, either 2319 is a timestamp or it's Monsters Inc. I don't have Netflix right now. Like I said, me and my husband quit buying this kind of stuff. And it's like, do I get a Netflix subscription real quick so I can watch with Nail and I? Or what? How do I watch with Nail and I? And because do I need to stop at 2319? Is there a certain timestamp that matters? I tried looking up dates like 2319. I've tried messing with the numbers. I saw somebody mess with the numbers and get a zip code in China, and I did that too. I got a 2319 in the stock trade world, which BlackRock has their hands in this, is a dairy company in China, and this dairy company is everything to China right now. It's like their biggest company in all of China. Dairy, yogurt, everything. Like, this is a big deal for China. This is their biggest factory. And so if you look up 2319 besides Monsters Inc., it will give you the stock number to buy stock in this Chinese company. So if you type in 02319, you will get this zip code of where this company lies in China. And so 02320, they did 02318. And so they did not get the same thing I got, which I got the company in China. So, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this stream. I hope I relayed enough about Bobby Driscoll and Hart Island. I did it in a quick 20 minutes, and I didn't think that as much as I had written down on these papers, I thought, can I say this all in 1, 2, 10-minute thing on TikTok, or am I going to do part 1, part 2? How am I going to do this? Because TikTok only gives you 10-minute segments, which is fine. And YouTube gives you, well, as much time as you want. Leave it on 24/7. I found a sleeping category. I can sleep. No, just kidding. I can just fall asleep right here, guys. And oh wait, that's Twitch. Sorry, that's Twitch. Twitch actually they have a channel where people can go to watch you sleep. It's kind of funny. Sorry for yawning. I did not get much sleep last night. And I had to get up at 8 o'clock this morning to buy my kids. Well, I was up before 8. Our alarm started going off at 6 a.m. And because I had to get going to the store at 8 a.m. to go buy my kids their gifts. And then we met up with them at the park and gave them their gifts and got to see them today for our 2-hour window. And so I'm a little tired, but I wanted to get this out. And I'm about ready to do a 4th of July TikTok dance video. And I'm like, am I too tired to do it today? Do I feel like changing my clothes? Or should I do it Monday? Should we wait till Monday for me to do a 4th of July fun dance? And courtesy of the red, white, and blue. Is that too harsh right now with the war in Iran to dance to Courtesy of Red, White, and Blue by Toby Keith? So, sorry, I am kind of rambling right now towards the end. I will just go ahead and say goodbye and hope you guys enjoyed this small breakdown of Bobby Driscoll, Hart Island, and why it's so sad that Disney's first darling ultimately ends up as just another unwanted, unloved mass grave. He's just in there. Oh, I forgot to talk about that. When they buried the LGBTQ people that were contaminated, they buried them 14 feet deep in lead-lined boxes because they're like, oh my gosh, these bodies are contaminated. They got in hazmat suits and buried these guys way deep, 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 deep down. And we're like, Kate, you go way down there so you don't come back up through the soil, because we don't want your body coming back up through the soil. And building these mass trenches were just devastating to these prisoners because the past bodies that lied. Hart Island is not very big, especially for a graveyard of 1 million people. And so they were swimming in people's soup as they dug these graves. This is why they buried them in lead-lined box deep down, because they didn't want them turning into dirt soup like the lunatic women, the male prisoners, the unwanted people of New York. If you had a loved one that you didn't claim within 30 days or sometimes less, New York got impatient and they said, Hart Island, baby, you get to go be like. It's amazing how careless how soulless humans can be, to just be like, hey, you do not get a proper burial. We're not going to try and find your loved ones. We got a place for y'all. If you're not claimed immediately, we're not storing you for 30 days. We don't have the room, especially during the AIDS epidemic, the COVID epidemic. When there comes an epidemic in New York, they're like, we do not want to store you. You're contaminated. We don't have the room to store you. And you're unloved and unclaimed, so no gravestone, no nothing. Like, you can't even get people out there to dig up and do DNA because people are piled on people in these mass graves. It's not a graveyard, guys. It's not. Hart Island is not a graveyard. It's just as bad as a wartime mass grave where they just roll all the bodies in there and you just know a bunch of soldiers are down there. And you're just like, yeah, that's a pile of soldiers down there. But we don't know what soldiers down there. Just a pile of soldiers. You know, you guys just and the colored people from the soldier camp, if they pass away, just right there, Hart Island. Good, you know, because nobody cared. Nobody cared about the colored folk, and Hart Island was a place that they stuck the colored folk. And they were like, you go to Hart Island. And then when billionaire Riley said, let's build an amusement park for them, sadly, on top of Hart Island, which you're going, this is odd, but okay. Sticking a Ferris wheel on a mass grave. Like, no wonder why this place is haunted. There's no place in Hart Island to get rest. There's no place for your soul to rest. There's no place for you to see your family. It's owned by the Department of Corrections. You can't get on there. This isn't a place you could just walk in and meander around like a regular graveyard in the city. Like right now, I could drive up to my graveyard in my small little town and wander the grave sites and nobody knows I'm there, just me. You know? And it's like, okay. You have to get permission from the Department of Corrections. You have to tell them why you want on Hart Island. And then you can't take pictures or anything. Cuz they don't want that. They don't want to be exposed for what they've done. So many, I can't think of how many mayors and governors and whatnot are guilty of this happening right under their nose, and they probably know and don't care because it's not their family. And if it's not your family, I know what it's like to have a family member die. Actually, 4 of them in the last 3 years have passed away. My dad, my brother, my grandma, and my aunt. And I never got to see any of their bodies. They all died out of state. 3 of them died in Washington. 1 of them died in Oregon. They all died out of state. I never got to see them. And I only have 1 bag of ashes that they tell me this is my dad. They say they cremated him. They say he passed away. They say they cremated him. Some days I sit here and wait for him to still, like, bust through my front door and walk up my stairs and be like, Rose! You know? Yeah, that's never going to happen again. And so I know what it's like to not see your loved one, to not get closure, to... It's hard. And we didn't even bury them. My mom has my brother's ashes. I haven't got any of those yet. I don't know where my grandma's ashes are, and I got to ask my cousin what she did with my aunt. My aunt just passed away on New Year's this year. And then in between all that, we've had 2 friends pass away, 2 family friends pass away, both of self-infliction. One on Christmas and one in August. So it's been a very sad 3 years because we've had a total of 6 people close to our family pass away. And I've seen none of their bodies. I did not get to say goodbye to any of them. And the only one we held a funeral for was my dad. was unable to make it to Dustin's funeral because my husband had neck surgery, and I got the time for Cameron's funeral wrong, and so I'm 30-40 minutes outside his city. I live outside Salt Lake City. And so I had the time wrong. I don't know how I got that mixed up, how I saw a 12 instead of a 2. And so I, oh my gosh, I babysat this kid for 5 years. And then I got the timing wrong. I really should have been there for his mother. And so my dad was the only one I was there for. So it sucks. But anyways, that's Bobby Driscoll and Hart Island. And I hope you guys enjoyed this time with me. And I hope I don't feel like I'm rambling. I am rambling towards this end. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit of a rambler. I spill my thoughts. But the biggest question now is, James Franco, when we expose Hollywood, what do we do? If we can expose Hollywood further. I mean, they're already semi-exposed. The fit flat earther on TikTok is out there showing the fallen angels that are stars that just reinvent themselves every like 30, 60, 70 years. And there's a bunch of people exposing the change that I'm worried about. Emily Blunt. She either is a really great actress or she just felt so different in Disclosure Day last night. Like her face wasn't her face anymore. And her eyes were semi-soulless. I'm worried about Emily Blunt. Have they gotten to Emily Blunt? Guys, tell me if they've gotten to Emily Blunt. Because if they got to Emily Blunt, they're going to get to her husband, John Krasinski. And everybody's beloved John Krasinski is going to be gone like Jim Carrey. Rest in peace, Jim Carrey. We loved you and your all-mocking tongue. We will never forget the all-mocking tongue. You exposed it. And now James Franco is saying, if I'm gone, you know who did it. Because we know who took Jim Carrey. We know who took Ariana Grande. We know who took, what's her name? Gosh, that other singer actress. We know who took them. And James Franco, we hope they don't take you. I hope you stay looking full of life. And I hope we help expose things for you. So let me know. I love you guys, and I will see you later. Thank you so much if you watched all the way through. Really, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we'll catch you later. Next, I think I want to get into Shirley Temple maybe before Judy Garland. Let's do Shirley Temple next. Let's expose Hollywood and what they did to Shirley Temple.